cold steel pressed against her thigh. That's what I remember most about the first time I saw Rebecca Harrison. Not her emerald dress or those sage honey eyes, but that little pearl-handled derringer hiding under all that silk. 6 drunk bastards had her cornered in the silver dollar. Big Mike Garrett breathing whiskey fumes in her face, talking about how a woman like her needed teaching. I was nobody then. Just another drifter nursing bad whiskey in a dark corner, watching decent people get swallowed by the territory's ugliness. But then she pulled that little gun. Cool as you please. She centered those twin barrels on Mike's chest and said, "Back off, or I'll put a hole in you, smaller than your brain." Her fingers shook, just a hair, but enough to remind me under all that iron she was still flesh and blood. A woman with that kind of sand dying cheap while cowards watched? No damn way I'd let that happen. Mike backed down that night, hands raised in mock surrender, snarling, "This ain't over. You can't hide behind that little pop gun forever." And Rebecca, steady as granite, replied, "I won't have to. It only takes one shot." Lord, friend, ever had one damn moment that cut your life clean in two? Like a Bowie knife through rawhide? Yeah, that was her. Morning found me on the road to Circle H Ranch with nothing but a bedroll and a decision I half regretted already. 29 years old, 5 years with the 6th Cavalry at Fort Huachuca behind me, chasing Apache raiders through desert canyons. The Army taught me to shoot straight, ride hard, and never leave good people defenseless. Ma back in Kentucky drilled it into me, tip your hat to a lady, before the fever took her when I was 16. The ranch sat pretty in a valley, 2,000 acres of prime grazing land. The kind men murder for. The kind Rebecca Harrison had been defending alone for 3 years, since Thomas Harrison's heart gave out during a cattle drive. She came out of the house wearing cotton instead of silk. But stranger, it didn't matter. Some women walk like the ground owes them rent. Rebecca was one of them. Didn't need to ask whose dirt it was. "You're trespassing," she called out. Not scared, just stating facts. I touched my hat brim. "Ma'am, I'm looking for work." Funny coincidence. Most men who see me in town suddenly need employment the next morning. "Yes, ma'am. I expect they do." Caught her off guard. Shoulders dropped a notch, like a bowstring going slack. She asked if I could work cattle, break horses, fix fence, handle troublemakers who didn't respect property lines. "Ma'am, I spent 5 years keeping peace in Apache country. Army promoted me to sergeant before I turned 25. I reckon I can handle whatever trouble you've got brewing." She studied me for a long moment. Woman like that, she'd survive too much to be anybody's fool. $30 a month, plus meals and a bed in the bunkhouse, she said finally. "You try anything improper, and you'll meet the business end of my derringer." "Wouldn't dream of it, ma'am." But as I swung down from my horse, I noticed how her dress outlined curves that made my mouth go dry, the graceful way she moved, the confidence that comes from surviving when everyone expects you to break. She caught me staring. Eyes locked one heartbeat, long enough for a spark. Couldn't tell if it was recognition or trouble of another brand. I'd lied, you see. I'd dream about it plenty. First 30 days crept by like fire-licking dry cheatgrass. Slow, mean, and nothing on God's earth gonna put it out. Sunrise to sunset, I proved myself. Gentling horses with patience instead of force. Mending fence line that previous hands had let rot. Spoke little, worked steady, kept my distance like a man with sense. But evenings got dangerous. Rebecca would bring coffee to the bunkhouse porch. We'd talk while the desert cooled and stars came out like pinpricks in black velvet. She talked about Philadelphia, silk gloves and tight collars that choked the life out of you. About meeting Thomas Harrison at a church social and marrying him for security rather than love, only to find affection growing between them, like desert wildflowers after rain. I never knew what it felt like to choose someone for myself, she admitted one evening, watching my hands work leather with the same careful patience I used on horses. Thomas was a good man, but our marriage was arranged, practical. Her husband had given her that derringer on their wedding day. A lady's gun, he'd said, practical man that he was, but it'll put a man down just as dead as a 45. Practical's important, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. But it ain't everything. Eyes met across the lamp glow. Weren't no coffee, weren't no talk, just something catching fire. Rebecca looked at me like I was a mystery worth solving, like I was a man, not a tool or a trophy. And I looked back, knowing I was in trouble deeper than any Apache ambush. The attraction built like pressure behind a dam. I'd catch her lingering when she brought meals. Notice how her breath hitched when our hands brushed passing a water bucket. The way her eyes traced the line of my shoulders when she thought I wasn't watching. I started finding excuses to check the house's security, my presence filling rooms that had been empty too long. Standing close enough to catch the scent of her. Soap and sunshine, and something uniquely Rebecca. But I was her hired hand, and she was a widow trying to survive in a world that already judged her. Lines existed for good reasons, even when crossing them might feel like salvation. Then Big Mike Garrett decided lines didn't matter. Found fresh hoofprints near the north pasture one morning. Too close to the house for casual travelers, pressed deep like whoever made them had been watching. Waiting. Then a gate latch broke in a way that looked deliberate rather than accidental. Clean cut, purposeful. Then Rebecca got nervous every time she had to ride to town alone. "Something's got you spooked," I said one evening, watching her pace the porch instead of settling in for our usual conversation. "Mike Garrett's been persistent," she admitted, her hand moving unconsciously to her skirt where the derringer rested. "Sending men to make offers on the ranch. Generous offers. The kind of generous that comes with unspoken threats. The kind that aren't really offers," I said. "Exactly." She turned to face me, and I saw real fear in her eyes for the first time. "He seems to think I'll be more reasonable once I realize how vulnerable I am out here. How alone." My expression went cold as a Kentucky winter. He's wrong about that. But we both knew courage only goes so far against numbers and money and ruthless intent. Mike Garrett had all three, plus a town that saw independent women as unnatural disruptions to the proper order of things. Ever feel thunder in your bones before the sky even cracks? That's how those days felt. That's what those days felt like. It came on a Tuesday morning when I rode to Tombstone for veterinary supplies, leaving Rebecca alone with chores that couldn't wait. Saw the dust cloud from 3 miles out, 6 riders moving fast, too purposeful to be friendly, and knew immediately what it meant. I pushed my roan gelding hard, took shortcuts only a cavalry scout would know, arrived just as Big Mike Garrett dismounted in her yard, with 5 men spreading out in a loose semicircle, blocking every escape route. "Afternoon, Rebecca," Mike called out. "Fine day for a conversation about your future." Rebecca backed toward the house, but knew she'd never make it. "I'm not interested in conversation." "Course you're not. That's why we're past the talking stage." Mike's smile was ugly. "Thomas left you well fixed. Good land, fine house, pretty woman to go with it. But you can't run a spread like this alone forever. Time you accepted reality." Her thumb found the derringer's hammer beneath her skirt. "Reality is, I've been running this ranch just fine for 3 years," she said, voice steady, despite the fear I knew she felt. "Reality is you're trespassing on my land." "Your land?" Mike laughed. "Darlin', the only thing you own is what men allow you to keep. Time for a lesson in how things really work. That's when I sent his hat spinning into the dust with my first shot. That was a warning, I called out from the ridge, my Colt 45 steady in my hand. Next one won't be. Well, well. Mike's hand moved toward his weapon. The hired help's got opinions. Got more than opinions. Got a duty to protect this ranch and everyone on it. Then hell broke loose, fast as summer lightning and twice as loud. My second shot took one of Mike's men in the shoulder, spinning him from his saddle with a scream. His horse bolted, and suddenly the odds were moving toward survival. Rebecca proved she was Thomas Harrison's widow, in more than name. That derringer barked twice, sharp, precise, as she put down the bastard trying to flank my position. But then she was out of ammunition, and Mike was charging toward her with murder in his eyes. That's when I showed why the 6th Cavalry had promoted me to sergeant before my 25th birthday. My horse went down under enemy fire. I hit the ground running, rolled behind the water trough, came up shooting with the methodical precision of a man who'd learned his trade in life or death circumstances. 1 shot, 2, 3, each finding its mark with the kind of accuracy that comes from years of practice and the absolute knowledge that missing meant dying, meant watching Rebecca die. Mike Garrett found himself suddenly alone, his companions dead or wounded, facing a man who looked at him with the cold eyes of a natural killer. All that bluster evaporated like spit on a hot stone. "This ain't over," he snarled, but his words lacked conviction. "Yes," I said, my Colt never wavering from his chest. "It is." Mike mounted his horse with hands that shook, his eyes promising future reckoning, even as he retreated. But as he rode away, trailing dust and defeat, Rebecca and I both knew something fundamental had changed. Lines had been crossed. Blood had been spilled, and there was no going back to the careful distance we'd maintained. In the sudden silence after violence, we stood closer than propriety allowed. Adrenaline and shared danger creating intimacy more powerful than mere attraction. Her chest heaved, my heart hammered, and the space between us felt charged like the air before lightning strikes. "You're bleeding," Rebecca whispered, noticing the crimson stain spreading across my shirt sleeve. "It's nothing," I started to say, but she was already guiding me toward the house, with hands that trembled from more than just the aftermath of gunfire. Some fences you kick down, you don't never put back up. The house felt different with me inside it. Smaller, more intimate, charged with possibilities we'd been denying for weeks. "Sit," Rebecca commanded, gathering supplies with shaking hands. "Let me see." I lowered myself into Thomas's old chair, felt the weight of that symbolism, even as pain lanced through my arm. She helped me out of my shirt, her fingers gentle against my skin, and the bullet wound became secondary to the awareness crackling between us. The bullet had gouged a furrow across my upper arm, painful but not dangerous. But Rebecca Harrison had been alone too long, had denied herself too much to ignore the sight of my bare chest in her sitting room. Lamplight played across muscles earned through honest labor, scars that spoke of a hard life honestly lived. When she leaned close to clean the wound, her breath caught. I could smell her, soap and fear sweat, and something indefinably feminine that made every nerve in my body come alive. "You're staring," I said quietly, my voice rough with barely controlled desire. "I'm appreciating," she replied, her fingers gentle against my wounded arm, but her eyes traveling places that had nothing to do with medical care. "It's been a long time since I've had reason to appreciate anything about a man." My intake of breath was sharp, audible. "Mrs. Harrison, Rebecca." She looked up to meet my eyes, and what I saw there nearly stopped my heart. After today, I think we're past formalities, don't you? The distance between us seemed to shrink without either moving. Her hand rested on my chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of my heart. My fingers brushed her cheek, traced the line of her jaw with infinite gentleness. "Is your mind always on what's under my skirt, Mr. Carter?" she whispered, the words carrying a double meaning that made my pupils dilate with understanding. The Derringer, the weapon that had saved both our lives today, but also the woman, the curves and warmth, and 3 years of loneliness she'd kept hidden beneath propriety and necessity. "Well, ma'am," I said, my thumb tracing her lower lip, "I reckon it's both the danger and the beauty that's got my attention." I kissed her, and something inside us busted wide open, like a dam finally giving up the ghost. This wasn't Thomas's careful affection or Mike's brutal possession. This was hunger, meeting hunger, need answering need. Two people who'd found something rare and precious in an unforgiving world. My hands tangled in her hair, loosing the careful pins that had kept it bound. She arched against me, her lips finding the pulse point at my throat, drawing a low groan I couldn't suppress. "I want to protect you," I whispered against her ear. "Not because you can't protect yourself, but because you shouldn't have to. Because I can't stand the thought of anything happening to you." It was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to her. I could see it in her eyes. We made love there in the sitting room, on the rug before the fireplace. Desert wind sang through the eaves, and the memory of shared danger was still electric in our blood. I touched her, like I'd gentle a half-broke mare. Slow, listening to every shiver, every catch in her breath, till she was trembling and calling my name hoarse. Her dress came off, revealing skin pale as cream in the firelight. She was beautiful, curves that filled my hands perfectly, the slight softness of her belly that made her real instead of some saloon fantasy. I kissed the hollow of her throat where her pulse raced, the valley between her breasts, the inside of her wrist. She gasped when my mouth found her nipple, arched when my hand slid between her thighs, and found her wet and ready and wanting. "Please," she whispered, pulling me up to kiss her mouth with desperate need. I know what you need, Rebecca. I know." I entered her slowly, watching her face as I filled her, seeing the moment pleasure replaced years of loneliness and careful control. Her eyes went wide, then soft, then hungry, as she adjusted to the feel of me inside her. She wrapped her legs around my waist, urging me deeper, and we found a rhythm as old as the desert itself. Slow at first, then faster as need overcame caution. The firelight played across our joined bodies, turning us golden. She went over the edge first, hollered my name, whole body locking tight like a cinch strap. Damn near dragged me right after her. Then again, when I changed the angle, hitting that spot inside her that made her see stars and forget every rule society had taught her about proper widows. By the time I followed her over the edge, emptying myself inside her, with a groan that came from somewhere deep, we were both slick with sweat and trembling with satisfaction, and something deeper than mere physical release. Afterward, we lay entwined on that rug, her head on my chest, my fingers combing through her loosened hair, listening to each other breathe. Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced since girlhood, the absolute certainty of being exactly where she belonged. And I felt something I'd never expected to find after years of drifting and fighting and surviving. Home. Dawn brought reality with harsh Arizona sunrise streaming through windows we'd forgotten to curtain. Rebecca woke in my arms, and I felt the weight of decision settling around us like a mantle. She didn't speak at first, just lay there, tracing the scars on my chest with gentle fingers. But I could feel her mind working, calculating the cost of what we'd done. "They'll call me a whore for taking up with my hired hand," she said finally, quietly. Not with shame, but with clear-eyed understanding of the world we lived in. Big Mike will use it as ammunition. Paint me as a woman whose judgment can't be trusted. My expression hardened, but not with shame or regret. With determination. "Then maybe it's time we found ourselves a new town," I said. "I hear California's got good ranch land. San Francisco Bay Area. Places where a man and woman can start fresh. Be judged by what they do instead of what folks think they know about them." The notion slammed into her like a .45 slug. Sudden, bright, and damn obvious the second it left my mouth. She had money from Thomas's investments, enough to buy good land anywhere in the West. I had skills that had transferred to any frontier. Together we could build something new. Something ours. "You'd do that?" she asked, searching my face for doubt or deception. "Leave everything behind to go west with a woman 10 years older than you? With a reputation that'll follow us even to California?" "Rebecca," I said, framing her face with my hands, making sure she saw the truth in my eyes. Been blowing like tumbleweed since Ma died. Finally found my stake right here. In this room. In you. I kissed her then, slow and deep, sealing the promise. "Besides," I added, 38 and 29 ain't that much difference when you're both grown. And any man who judges me for choosing a woman of substance over some young fool who doesn't know her own mind, well, that man's opinion ain't worth a damn anyway." She smiled then, real and true, and I saw the Rebecca Harrison who'd pulled a derringer on 6 men without flinching. The woman who'd run a ranch alone for 3 years. The woman who'd just decided to burn her life down and start over for the chance at something real. 6 months later, we stood on a hillside overlooking San Francisco Bay, watching ships navigate choppy waters while seabirds wheeled overhead. The Circle C Ranch, our ranch, built with money from selling Rebecca's Arizona spread and named with our initials intertwined, stretched behind us. 2,000 acres of California green that'd support cattle and horses and the dreams of 2 people who'd found each other in the harsh beauty of Arizona territory. Rebecca still carried her derringer, the pearl-handled Colt 41 that Thomas Harrison had given her on their wedding day, that had saved our lives in her ranch yard, that had been pressed against her thigh the first moment I'd seen her. But now it was protection for both of us. Insurance against a world that could still be dangerous for those who refused to conform. Guardian of a different kind of love, a different kind of future. "No more hiding what's under that skirt, Mrs. Carter," I said, my arm around her waist as we watched the sun set over the Pacific. "Nothing to hide from you, husband," Rebecca replied, leaning into my strength and feeling the absolute rightness of it. Behind us, our ranch hands were calling cattle home for the evening. The sound of their voices mixed with the ocean breeze and the cry of gulls, creating a music entirely different from Arizona's harsh desert silence. Ahead lay whatever challenges California might bring. Drought or flood, market crashes or claim jumpers, the 1,000 difficulties that came with building a life on any frontier. But that night, we had each other, and the certainty that some risks were worth taking, no matter how dangerous they seemed. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Now you've heard my story, friend. Was I right to cross those lines? To risk everything for a woman I barely knew? To take what society said wasn't mine to take? Some would say I was a fool. A drifter who seduced a vulnerable widow for her money and her land. Others might say I was a man who finally found something worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth building a life around. I've done a lot of things I ain't proud of, killed men, broken promises, drifted away when things got hard. But loving Rebecca Harrison, starting over with her in California,